on buses across the city. Now get to know Joumana Kayrouz.
The war broke out in my home country, Lebanon. I was 11 years old, and I saw a lot of bloodshed and inequality and poverty. You can't grow up in an environment like that and not be affected by it and not want to make a difference. I graduated from Yale University with a master's in ethics. I speak 4 languages. It has always been innate in me fighting for the underdog and trying to do whatever it is I can to make a difference in the world.
Let Joumana Kayrouz protect your rights. Call the law offices of Joumana Kayrouz at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS extension 100 or visit yourrights.com.
مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتمنى لكم السلامة في ظل انتشار وباء كوفيد-19. المحامية جومانا كيروز مثلت على مدى 22 عاما ضحايا حوادث السيارات مع طاقم من المحامين ذوي الخبرة، وحصلت لموكليها على تعويضات بمئات الملايين من الدولارات قبل أن تختار المحامي الذي سيدافع عن قضيته. دقق في تاريخه المهني. ومع مكاتب جومانا كيروز ستنذهل بآراء مئات الموكلين وخبراتهم الإيجابية في جوجل ريفيوز. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يتحدثون لغتك العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645 والاستشارة مجانية. برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز المختصة في قضايا حوادث السيارات مع نخبة من المحامين في اختصاصات عدة منها الطلاق والهجرة والإفلاس، يأتيكم الآن على الهواء مباشرة. أسعد الله أوقاتكم بالخير مستمعينا في كل مكان. أهلا بكم في حلقة جديدة وموضوع جديد في برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. كالمعتاد بإمكانكم المشاركة على الهواء، وأرقام الهواتف في الاستوديو 313-769-6666 519-256-1023. دائما عن طريق الواتساب، رقم الهاتف هو 313-327-7074. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتعامل مع قضايا الإصابات الشخصية من ضمنها حوادث السيارات، إصابات العمل، الأخطاء الطبية، وقضايا الهجرة والتجنس، قضايا الإفلاس والضمان الاجتماعي، وقوانين العائلة. أيضا بإمكانكم الحصول على استشارات مجانية في هذه الاختصاصات على الرقم 248-557-3645. تحياتنا لكم جميعا. جومانا، مساء الخير.
صباح الخير رامي، يعطيك ألف عافية. كيفك اليوم؟
الحمد لله، نسأل عنك إن شاء الله بخير.
كتر خير الله. صباح الخير لكل المستمعين، وصباح الخير لضيفنا لليوم مثل كل نهار خميس المحامي باتريك هوران. Pat, good afternoon.
Hi Joumana, how are you today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm really looking forward to 2021.
Yes, well, everybody is. Before we start with you, Attorney Patrick Horan, I just want to take less than 5 minutes, I promise. Tomorrow, we will be talking about something very important on our bankruptcy show. Every Friday, we talk about bankruptcy. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about something that is not technically bankruptcy, but will be important to a lot of people. When you think that you may be sued, and you have property, you have money, you have real estate, can you go ahead and start transferring that property to your brother and sister and cousin 5 times removed and your in-laws and all of that in anticipation of being sued and in anticipation of getting a money judgment against you? We're going to be talking about that because that's a very important question and one that I don't think we've ever talked about before. So tomorrow with attorney Michael Bankstein, it's technically not his specialty, but we will be talking about that issue. So رامي، بكرة بدنا نحكي عن نقطة كتير مهمة، وهيدي النقطة ولا مرة حكينا عنها سابقا. رح نحكي عنها بتفاصيل دقيقة كتير. رح أحكي عن one of the cases اللي نزل من المحكمة محكمة الاستئناف في 21 شباط 2017، وفي كتير cases غيرها بتحكي عن الاحتيال، بس مش الاحتيال ضمن إطار الإفلاس. دايما المحامي مايكل بانكستين بيقلنا انه للانسان اللي بده يقدم افلاسه المحكمه عبر البانكربسي تراستي بتطلع 6 سنين لورا، ان كان نيته كان يحتال او ما نيته يحتال، اذا قلب اي شيء باسمه منه لاي حدا تاني لاقل من الفير ماركت فاليو لهيدي الممتلكات، البانكربسي تراستي والحكومة عبره تعتبرها كأنه it was a fraudulent transfer، يعني تعتبرها كأنه تمت بالاحتيال وبتعتبرها كأنه ما تمت. في قانون كمان بيحكي عن الأشخاص مش اللي بدهم يقدموا بانكربسي، بس الأشخاص اللي بدهم يقدموا اللي خايفين بدهم يواجهوا دعوة، وبقلب الدعوة رح يكون في حكم ضدهم، وهذا الحكم رح يكون مادي. هل بيقدروا قبل ما يواجهوا الدعوة، أو هن عم بيواجهوا الدعوة وقبل ما يطلع الحكم ضدهم، إذا في ممتلكات باسمهم، بيت باسمهم، مصاري باسمهم، هل بيقدروا؟ هيدول ما عم بدهم يقدموا بانكربسي، بدهم خايفين انه يصير دعوة والدعوة توصل لحكم مصاري. هل بيقدروا يبلشوا يحطوا الارض باسم اختهم، والبزنس باسم بيهم، والبيت باسم الكازن تبعهم او صديقهم؟ هل بيمشي الحال؟ هل في قانون ضد هيدا الشيء؟ هيدا اللي رح نحكي عنه بكرة بطريقة كتير مفصلة. السبب اللي حبيت أحكي عنه، إجاني اتصال من شخص من الجالية العربية والكلدانية، للأسف بيو شخص مسن بالعمر، وعم نغير شوي السيناريو.
نعم.
بيو مسن بالعمر، وكان عم بيسوق سيارة كان شاريها قبل ب5 أيام من شخص تاني، وبعد ما اشترى انشورنس عليها. خلاصة الأمر، من بعد ما اشترى السيارة تعرض لحادث سيارة، ضرب شخص ماشي على الطريق وقتله. اللي
واو.
ضربه توفى. اجته رسالة من محامي تبع عائلة المتوفي، انه بدهم يطلبوا منه الانشورنس انفورميشن لانه بدهم يقدموا طلب. ابنه اتصل فيي وحابب يعرف اذا الاب اللي هو صاحب الشأن اللي كان عم بيسوق سيارة uninsured، اجته هيدي الرسالة، خايف انه من بعد الرسالة بده يصير في دعوة. هل عنده بيت باسمه؟ هل بيقدر يقلب البيت باسم حدا تاني، او هل بيقدر يبيع البيت؟ هيدا كان السؤال، وكان ناطر مني الجواب. ففكرت انه هيدا موضوع بهم كتير من المستمعين. مش بانكربسي بس، في خوف انه يقام دعوة. هل بيقدر يتصرف؟ هل بيقدر ينقل البيت؟ هل بيقدر يبيع البيت ويستفيد من المصاري؟ رح نحكي عنه هيدا بطريقة
إن
مفصلة
شاء الله.
كتير 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 بكرة ببداية الحلقة مع المحامي مايكل بينكستين. وهلا بننتقل لموضوعنا لليوم مع المحامي باتريك هوران. Pat, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for giving us a few minutes to introduce something we're going to talk about tomorrow. I want to start by talking about 2 or 3 points that have to do with workman's compensation, and then I move on to talk about social security, particularly those who apply for social security and they have a mental injury, a psychological injury, let's say depression, or let's say bipolar disorder, or let's say schizophrenic, or any other psychological issue, how they can go about proving their case in front of a judge so that the judge can give them SSI or SST. But let's start first with workman's compensation injuries. You've been getting a number of calls where people are getting injured in a work setting and they're taking long before they're going to see a doctor. You were telling me about someone who got injured on the job and his back is hurting him and did not see a doctor for 2 weeks after that. What's the problem with that? What's the downfall of waiting? What if the pain is not very bad?
Well, that's right, Joumana. And I think a lot of us, and maybe especially my gender, we want to just kind of brush ourselves off and pretend that we're and when you do that, when you don't make a record of getting hurt on the job, the response you might get from your boss or from their insurance company is, well, this guy didn't hurt himself. He kept working, and then 2 weeks later he stopped working. We don't know why. And they'll use that to build a defense of their case.
Okay, so you're telling me that men more than women tend not to report their injuries on the job right away. It's kind of a gender thing. You're also telling me that by doing that, you think that you want to tough it out, or quite often, and we see that with car accidents as well. And the problem, would love to tough it out, hoping that it will go away. The problem is, what if it doesn't go away? And it's now a week, a month, 6 months after. Now you have an insurance company, whether it is a car insurance company or whether it is a workman's compensation insurance company, saying, well, how do we know that this was caused by the car accident? How do we know this was caused by a work-related injury? So here you are trying to tough it out. Here you are trying to continue with your life, hoping that you're in pain today, but it will be gone tomorrow. But by doing that, they will use it against you because they will then say, how do we know this was caused by the accident? How do we know this was caused by the work-related injury? Correct?
Right. And in a large company, a big three automaker, something like that, they have a formal process for making an incident report when there's an injury or an incident on the job. But the more typical workplaces now are smaller shops, and they may not have a formal method of logging that an incident occurred if it doesn't require immediate hospitalization. So if somebody hurts themselves on the job, they can say, hey, boss, my back hurts after I lifted that up. And the boss will say, okay, can you keep working? I guess so. And you keep working, and nobody seems to remember that claim was made. So it's important to be a squeaky wheel and make sure you log that complaint when it happens.
Okay. So again, we want the causation to be there, and the causation has also to do with time in a way. The more time you allow between the onset of the injury and the first time you report it to your employer and a doctor, the more you give the insurance company a chance to say, how do we know, number one, this happened within the scope of your employment, and two, how do we know that it's caused by that? It could have been you on the weekend lifting a box in your garage.
Right. And you just mentioned a minute ago with auto cases, and I'm sure it's also true when you get hurt on the job, that there's a certain amount of adrenaline when an accident first occurs that people maybe don't notice for 24 hours how injured they are. And then they go to the doctor, and sure enough, they got a real significant injury.
Right. And again, it's the same. Anytime you have an injury, God made it such that the body releases, oxytocin and serotonin, which are kind of pleasure, hormones that give you a feeling of well-being and mask the pain. And it takes up to 72 hours for these drugs that are manufactured by your brain to protect your body from the trauma to start withdrawing. That is why it's not unheard of, and I often hear it from our car accident victims. I felt okay the first day or two or three. Now I'm starting to feel the pain. Well, the injury existed the minute the accident happened, the minute the work related injury happened. Only your body was protecting you from that trauma by releasing these high doses of serotonin and oxytocin, and it takes time for them to withdraw from the body. As time goes on, up to 72 hours, that's 3 days, you start feeling the pain. The injury existed at the time of impact, but you're going to feel the pain of it a day or two or three or a week later. You
Right.
want a good, yes, go ahead, please.
So it's important to make sure you timely report it when it happens, and also to be specific. Don't say, I hurt myself, boss. Say, I hurt my shoulder. I hurt my left shoulder. Be very specific about where your pain is, because that can be important later on if you're diagnosed with a condition adjacent to where you thought you were hurt.
Right. So the first piece of advice we're giving people is, by taking too long, you may be hurting yourself. The second piece of advice we are telling people is the specificity rule. When you report an injury, first on the job, second at the doctor, start from head to toe, and however little the pain is, that little pain today could be a surgery a year from now. You don't know. Nobody knows. Only God knows. Report everything you are feeling from head to toe without exaggerating, but without also making little of what you feel just because you barely feel it. Try as much as you can to be specific. Yes, you're not a doctor, but just report everything you feel. If you report everything you feel, you've done the best you can. Tell us, why are you giving this piece of advice today? You told me about a client.
Yeah, I had a client from a Ford plant who was on the line and was injured when the torque gun she was using to install parts in the car slipped and violently twisted her body, and she almost had to be carried off the line to Plant Medical. And she described pain in her shoulder blade to the nurse on duty at the Plant Medical. In fact, when the pain didn't go away, they determined that it was a fracture in her thoracic vertebrae caused by the twisting. And the workers' comp for Ford Motor has denied the claim, saying that she said she hurt her shoulder. Well, that's ridiculous. She pointed to an area on her body, and that nurse got the diagnosis wrong.
Okay, and how were you able to successfully defend her?
Well, I got the medical records from the emergency room she went to after they released her from the plant that showed the fracture in the thoracic vertebrae from a CT scan. And I pointed out how that's right next to your shoulder blade, and you can't expect a layperson to know the difference between those two areas.
Okay, so you were able to, in essence, say, look, what she pointed to is close enough. And besides, she's not a doctor.
Right.
But
Right.
when possible, if you know exactly what is hurting you, when possible, report it. Be as specific as you can.
For sure. And that way it makes it a lot harder for them to defend the case. I mean, all of my cases, whether they're workers' comp or whether they're Social Security disability claims, are disability. But workers' comp has the added difficulty of proving causation.
Okay, very good. Very good advice. Before we take a break, and by the way, I had a client today, and he's not the first client, who says, Joumana, when you are giving the phone number on the radio of your office, can you please slow down? And I explained to him that we are doing this primarily as education to one another. This is not an infomercial about the law firm, but I promise that we will make an effort to give the law office number and read it very slowly. So let me give the law office number for those who wish to call on us. There are a lot of lawyers out there. It's really up to you. But should you decide to call on our law firm, the number to call is 248 557 3645. Again, the number is 248 557 3645. Before we take a break, let's remind our listeners that when you are in a work-related injury, you only need to see the doctor imposed on you by your workman's compensation insurance the first 28 days after the injury, the first 28 calendar days. That includes Saturdays and Sundays. Pat?
Yes, that's right. It used to be 10 days. And when the Republicans in Lansing changed that law, it really hurt injured workers because you can, first of all, the company clinic is not the best level of care. And secondly, because it's a company clinic, they're not acting in the person's best interest. They're trying to get the person back on the job or find a way to deflect from the problem being work-related.
Okay, thank you very much. So أول 3 نقاط بدنا نوصلهم اليوم. أوقات الإنسان بيتعرض لإصابة ضمن العمل بس ما بيبلغ عنها، وأوقات كمان مش بس ما بيبلغ عنها وما بيتعالج. إجمالا الرجال أكثر من النسوان، النساء بيطولوا لحتى يروحوا يتعالجوا لأنه بيفكروا أنه يمكن شغلة بتمرق على خير وما رح يكون منها مشاكل. المشكلة أنه أوقات الألم بيتضاعف، والمشكلة أنه أوقات الإصابة حقيقية. المشكلة اللي بتصير وقت اللي الأشخاص بيطولوا لحتى يروحوا يتعالجوا بإصابة ضمن العمل بتعطي opportunity، بتعطي فرصة للإنشورنس كومباني، الوركمنز كومبنسيشن انشورنس كومباني، إنه تقول له للمصاب إنه هيدي الإصابة ما صارت ضمن العمل، أو هيدي الإصابة ما خصها، يمكن أنت أصبت على الويكند إلى آخره إلى آخره. من الضروري جدا يكون في بيبر تريل وقت الواحد بيروح عند الدكتور. من الضروري جدا من الأول يروح عند الدكتور، لأنه ما بنعرف الإصابة اللي اليوم يمكن هي عم بتألمنا 1%، يمكن هاي الإصابة بعد 6 أشهر أو سنة تؤدي لعملية. ما حدا بيعرف، مثل ما قلنا بالإنجليزي، إلا الله. بيكون الإنسان عم بيفكر إنه let's tough it out، يعني خلينا نمرقها، بركي بتمرق وبقوم بكرة وبصير أحسن، لأنه ما بنعرف شو المستقبل ممكن يؤدي. من الضروري جدا نروح عند الحكيم ونخبره كل شيء، ما نبالغ بس ما نقلل كمان، لأنه في نقطة تانية وخبرنا عن موكلة كانوا عم بيهاجموها لأنه ما قلت لهم عن الشولدر بريد تبعها، عطتهم عن محل تاني قالت لهم عم يوجعها، قدر أثبت العكس لأنه الملف الطبي فرجى أنه وين هي حطت إيدها قريب كتير على مكان الإصابة. but the point is قد ما الإنسان بيقدر يكون دقيق أكتر وقت اللي بيبلغ عن إصاباته من راسه لكعب إجريه، كل ما هيدي الشغلة بتكون أحسن له للملف تبعه. بالإنجليزي بنقول بي سبيسيفيك، يعني قد ما فيك تقدر تحدد وين عم تشعر بالألم. طبعا أنت منك طبيب، حضرتك منك طبيبة، that's fine، بس بذات الوقت اللي بتشعروه، مكان اللي بتشعروه قولوا عنه، لأنه يمكن اليوم 1%، يمكن بعدين يصير منه عوارض كتير كبيرة وعلاج كتير كبير. وثالث نقطة بدنا نوصلها، تذكروا أنه فقط أول 28 نهار متواصلين من بعد الإصابة مجبورين تلتزموا بالدكتور اللي الوركمنز كومبنسيشن انشورنس بيعين لكم اياه، بس من بعد 28 نهار مش مضطرين تلتزموا. نصيحتنا ما تلتزموا، لأنه هؤلاء الدكاترة إجمالا منهم كتير، يعني ما بياخدوا كتير وقتهم. وثانيا لنتذكر مين اللي عينهم وهن اللويالتي تبعهم، يعني إخلاصهم لمين؟ للإنشورنس كومباني اللي عينتهم، للإنشورنس كومباني اللي عينتهم. سو من الأفضل تغييرهم، بيقدر الإنسان يغيرهم المصاب من بعد 28 نهار. بفتكر رامي السيدة لينا عم تسألنا عن workman، عن discrimination، هو خارج اختصاصنا بس رح نحكي عنه بطريقة سريعة قبل ما ناخد وقفة. Attorney Patrick Horan, this is a question that is, let me read it. I don't think it is workman's compensation. I think it is work discrimination. Let's see. Can you please talk in one of your shows about gender discrimination at work? I am a woman and I feel that my boss treats his employees differently. He pays me less than other men, even if we do the same work, and I have more qualifications. What are my rights and what can I do? Okay, Lena, this is a wonderful topic. I am certainly not qualified to talk about it, but we can talk about it in general. And I also think that I can have one of my colleagues who specializes in discrimination. And in fact, I think he does speak Arabic because he is of Egyptian descent, a very well-known attorney, a very capable and competent attorney, can come in and talk about this on the show. Thank you for suggesting this. I will also add, before we take a break, Lena, that it has been historically, it has been the fact that it's been the case that until recently, women make 70 to 80 cents on the dollar of what men make for the same job, same qualifications. Do you care to comment about that as a layperson, Patrick Horan?
Well, I will say this.
And that is why there are federal laws that are constantly being enacted to cure that gap. But go ahead.
Well, I will say this. In my experience, although what she's describing is not technically a workers' compensation claim, it's not unusual for the victim of that kind of discrimination to suffer emotional or psychiatric injury on the job. If, for instance, they're being harassed by a male, and that kind of harassment can cause a disability because of the mental anguish that they suffer from the job. And that would be a workers' comp claim at that point.
Okay, and is it because it happened on the job? Because it will not be related to her job on the job. Why is it still a work-related injury? Is it because it arose out of her job? It's an unintended consequence.
In the course of her employment, if, let's just say that not only is she getting paid less, but she's getting badgered and harassed by her boss, a sexual harassment type of claim, that can lead to a disability from the psychological damage it imports, and that's a workers' comp case.
Okay, so a classic workman's compensation injury is, let's say, somebody who works on the factory and gets injured by a machine. But another kind of a work-related injury is if, because of doing your job, you have suffered unintended consequences, like somebody else, discriminating against you, and because of that, say you suffer psychological pain.
Right. Or any other kind of exposure you have on the job that causes you a disability.
اوكي. سيدة لينا، إذا بتعطينا شوية وقت رح أتكلم مع زميل من زملائي اللي هو محامي كتير معروف، كتير محترم، وعنده خبرة discrimination, work-related discrimination and discrimination on the job. بنستضيفه وهو من أصل مصري، وبنحكي عن هذا الموضوع، وبنحكي عن القانون الفيدرالية سيدة لينا اللي صارت مطلعة أكثر من مرة على ال discrimination in pay, the pay inequality between men and women for the same work, for the same qualifications, for the same job qualifications بين الرجال والنساء. So thank you very much for proposing this. وعلى فكرة أي شخص بيحبنا نحكي عن أي موضوع قانوني يبعث لنا messages. We will make that happen. Let's take a very quick break. ومن بعده رح نحكي كمان عن نقطة أخيرة بالworkman's compensation لليوم، ومن بعدها ننتقل للسوشيال سيكيورتي، شيء بيسموه the eggshell skull theory، عن الأشخاص اللي بيكونوا عندهم إصابات وعندهم حالة جسدية معينة وبيتعرضوا لإصابة ضمن العمل، وهيدي بتسبب لهم إنه يضلوا خارج العمل أكثر من أشخاص أخرى تعرضوا لذات الإصابة بس ما كان عندهم pre-existing injuries.
هل لديك مشاكل في قضايا الضمان الاجتماعي أو قانون إصابات العمل؟ المحامي باتريك هوران من مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يضع خبرة 28 عاما في قضايا الضمان الاجتماعي وإصابات ضمن العمل في خدمتكم. الاستشارات مجانية. اتصل الآن بمكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز 248-557-3645. يتحدثون لغتكم العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتمنى لكم السلامة في ظل انتشار وباء كوفيد-19. المحامية جومانا كيروز مثلت على مدى 22 عاما ضحايا حوادث السيارات مع طاقم من المحامين ذوي الخبرة، وحصلت لموكليها على تعويضات بمئات الملايين من الدولارات. قبل أن تختار المحامي الذي سيدافع عن قضيته، دقق في تاريخه المهني. ومع مكاتب جومانا كيروز ستنذهل بآراء مئات الموكلين وخبراتهم الإيجابية في جوجل ريفيوز. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يتحدثون لغتك العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645 والاستشارة مجانية. Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. عودة إلى برنامج Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. أرقام الهواتف في الاستوديو هي 313-769-6666 519-256-1023، ودائما على الواتساب بإمكانكم المشاركة على الرقم 313-327-7074. جمانة نرجع لك.
شكرا رامي. ورقم تليفون المكتب هو 248-557-3645 248-557-3645. شكرا. انتقالا للأشخاص اللي بيكون عندهم حالة جسدية، عندهم pre-existing injuries، يمكن عندهم إصابات من قبل، يمكن عندهم أمراض، يمكن عندهم حوادث سيارات، يمكن عندهم قضايا انزلاق، وبيتعرضوا لإصابة ضمن العمل. الإنسان العادي اللي يمكن ما عنده هالإصابات يمكن بتاخد معه شهر، شهرين، 6 أشهر ليرجع على العمل، وإنما هذا الشخص اللي عنده إصابات أو diseases أو conditions قبل ما يتعرض للإصابة ضمن العمل رح يطول أكثر بكتير ليرجع للعمل. هل هالتطويل اللي سببه أنه عنده إصابات قبل الإصابة ضمن العمل، هل Workman's Compensation Insurance Company مسؤولة عنها؟ بتدفع هيدي الطبابة؟ بتدفع الراتب لأنه مطول هيدا الإنسان ليرجع على العمل؟ رح أعطي an example. الإنسان عنده سكري. الإنسان اللي ما عنده سكري وبيتعرض لإصابة ضمن العمل، حسب شو هي إصابته، سلم جدلا رجع على العمل بعد 2 أو 3. الإنسان اللي عنده سكري وصار عنده إصابة مثلا للتو تبعه، مثل الإكزامبل رح نستعمله لموكل من موكلينا، وطول لقدر رجع على العمل لأنه السكر اللي موجود معه، الديابيتس الموجودة معه طولت له قدرته ليرجع على العمل. مين المسؤول عن هالتطويل؟ هل الانشورنس كومباني تبع الوركمنز كومبنسيشن مسؤولة عن الطبابة ومسؤولة عن الراتب، علما انه الكونديشن تبعه قبل ما يتعرض للإصابة من العمل هي اللي أخرته من الرجوع للعمل. Tony Patrick Horan, tell us about the client who had diabetes.
So I had a client who had an injury to his toe. I believe it was his big toe, a crush injury that was not particularly severe.
On the job.
Exactly. He's on the job.
On the job. Okay.
On his job. I believe maybe a forklift rolled over his toe, something like that. It was not a terrible injury, but it was going to keep him off work for 6 to 8 weeks. So he made a workers' comp claim, and he was paid workers' comp benefits. And while he was off with his toe,
so he was paid for his medical treatment and about 65-70% of his wages.
Right, his workers' comp wage loss and his medical care for the toe injury. Now, the interesting part of the case was that while he was having his toe taped up, he had to place all of his weight on his heel. And this gentleman was diabetic, and he developed a diabetic ulcer on his heel of that foot because of the treatment to his toe. And I was able to show that that was a natural consequence of the toe injury, and that he should be compensated for the lost time for the diabetic ulcer as well, which kept him off work for another 4 months.
So without the diabetes, he would have been back to work, let's say, in 2 months. So the workman's compensation can pay the wages for those 2 months and the medical bill. Because of his pre-existing condition, he had to use his heel, and because of the diabetes, he ended up developing an ulcer on his heel, which delayed him an extra 4 months on top of that from returning to work. The workman's compensation insurance company did not want to pay him those 4 extra months of wages and medical treatment. You were able to successfully represent him and get those 4 months of medical treatment, extra medical treatment, and wages paid because it was a consequence of the diabetes, correct?
That's right. And I think I heard you use the phrase that we always use, and that's the eggshell skull theory, that right. The defendant takes the plaintiff as they find him.
Yes.
You take 2 individuals, everybody's different, and the same knock on me might just cause me to say, hey, quit it. And the knock on the head to you might cause your skull to be fractured and you couldn't work forever.
So 2 people will not react to the same injury the same way. Some of us have an eggshell skull. بيقولوا بالعربي رامي eggshell skull يعني هن نعم تفضل.
يعني اللي جمجمتهم خفيفة أو مثل غطاء البيضة. نعم.
رقيقة مثل غشاء البيضة. صح. قديش غشاء البيضة ضعيف.
كثير.
Are you translating the idiom correctly? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, I am. Yes, we are. Thanks to Rami, actually. Nice try. You can't help us translating into Arabic, Pat Horan. But it is true. يعني قديش غشاء البيضة رقيق. في عنا أوقات موكلين قبل ما يوقع الحادث، قبل ما يوقع الانزلاق، قبل ما توقع الإصابة ضمن العمل، هن هيك. هؤلاء الأشخاص رح يطولوا أكتر بكتير ويمكن يصير عندهم مضاعفات كتير بسبب الإصابة. هل الانشورنس كومباني المسؤولة هي اللي بتتحمل؟ والجواب هو يس. صحيح إنه هن عم بيطولوا أكتر بسبب أشياء عندهم إياها قبل الانزلاق، قبل حادث سيارة أو قبل الوركمنز كومبنسيشن، but الانشورنس تبع الانزلاق، الانشورنس تبع الوركمنز كومبنسيشن، الانشورنس تبع حادث سيارة برضو هن المسؤولين. هيدا النقطة اللي بدنا نوصلها. وعنا اتصال بفتكر رامي.
نعم، عنا عمار على الخط.
هلو.
مرحبا، يعطيك العافية ست جمانة.
يا أهلا وسهلا أستاذ عمار، شكرا.
شكرا لك و thank you Mr. Pat Horan. This is a great show. عندي سؤال. I have a question about the pre-existing conditions. يعني yes. I'm a bit confused whether it's physical or mental pre-existing conditions. يعني it sounds like a two-way sword here. يعني the insurance company can use it against you or you can use it against them. Like, I understand when you talked about how vulnerable the person is when they have pre-existing condition and then they get into an injury, whether it's physical or mental. However, can the insurance company use that and try to shift the blame that, it's because this person or the plaintiff had the defendant had pre-existing, so we're going to shift the blame to that when it comes to a settlement.
So let me ask two questions before we have Pat answer. Number one, are you talking within the context of a work-related injury or a car accident?
Car accident.
Okay, and I'm sure, and the answer I'm sure is the same, Patrick will say. And another question is, are you talking about pre-existing psychological injuries?
It's an in general question, says Joumana. I just want to get clear this issue here, that just to understand how the pre-existing medical conditions affect somebody's claim, whether it's work-related injury, whether it's car accident,
or car accident. And I think
because
the answer is the same.
I have something, because some of the people are afraid to disclose these kind of things just because it might hurt them, and it comes back and then hurts them after. So I just wanted also to be clear to people that never. Yeah.
What a wonderful comment, because they're afraid of disclosing them because it might hurt them, and guess what? It will come back to hurt them and haunt them. Versus if you disclose it, and then you can distinguish what is old from what's new, and what's old from what's now aggravated. So I'll give you an example. You may have had a surgery on your low back before. Well, fine. You had that before. Your car insurance company or workman's compensation is not responsible for that. But did the new accident, the new trauma, make this worse? Can we show it was made worse? If it was made worse, then the insurance company you're dealing with right now, yes, is responsible for the aggravation. So before I talk about it more in the context of a car accident, Attorney Patrick Horan, I think you just answered it, but if someone has pre-existing low back injury or a neck surgery or a shoulder surgery, and now they are, or a psychological injury, and now they are in a car accident, they're in a work-related injury, will the workman's compensation insurance use it against them?
So with workers' compensation, we have to show that there is a change in the pathology to the person's condition. So anybody my age, I'm not going to say your age, Joumana, but my age, somebody as old as me.
I am 36, and that's my story.
And but anybody my age, Joumana, walks around every day and might have some back pain. Okay, we might even tell our doctor when we go to our checkup, yeah, my back hurts every now and again. Well, if I get hurt on the job, I'm going to get an X-ray. I might even get an MRI. And if the X-ray and MRI show pathology in the back that looks like it's more than just the aging process, not just a degenerative change, but a change to the pathology in my back, like a herniated disc or a slipped disc in the back, then you've got a workers' compensation claim. Just having prior pain and aches are not enough. But in the past, if you had a significant problem, you're going to have to show that problem changed. The actual pathology changed because of the work injury. Okay.
So, Ustaz Ammar, let me break this down for you. You always have to show whether it is a workman's compensation or a car accident. You have to show new injuries, or you have to show that you had an old injury that something happened to now, that it is called aggravated. يعني صار في مضاعفات. يعني الإصابة تبعك كانت 1 2 وهلأ صارت أكتر. كيف منفرجيها؟ منفرجي الفحوصات قبل، إذا في MRIs بالأخص، ومنقارنها بالفحوصات بعد. منقارن ومنقدر نفرج الفرق. So الانشورنس مسؤولة عن المضاعفة، مش مسؤولة عن الإصابة اللي كانت قبل ما تم الحادث أو الwork related injury.
Right, and now those are physical problems, and then when you mentioned a psychiatric problem, that's treated a little differently in a workers' compensation claim, because in a workers' compensation claim, to demonstrate a psychiatric injury, you have to show that given all the other things going on in your life, that the stressor and the job is what caused you to become disabled. So if you've got somebody who goes to their psychiatrist and they're going through a messy divorce at home and that's causing them stress, and their boss is being a jerk to them and that's causing them stress, well, we have to show that given everything, it's the job that caused the disability. So those cases are difficult in workers' comp.
Sure. And since you are talking, I hope we have answered Mr. Ammar. Logically speaking, it kind of makes sense. A new insurance company is only responsible for what is new to you because of the injury, or for what existed but now is made worse because of the injury. It kind of makes sense, Attorney Patrick Horan. It's logical, isn't it?
I think so. And the nice thing is the diagnostics are there. It's not unusual to have somebody, especially the example you gave of somebody who had a prior surgery to their back and then returned to work. Well, guess what? There's going to be diagnostic films to show what condition their back was in after that old surgery.
Right. You compare old MRIs with new MRIs. You obtain the medical records from before the accident. You see what the person was complaining to their doctor. You compare that with after the accident. And I want to again thank Mr. Ammar, because he brought such an important point. A lot of people tend to withhold telling us what their conditions were before of the accident because it will hurt them. Sure enough, if they don't tell us, it will hurt them. Let me tell you how a workman's compensation insurance company, or a car insurance company, or the insurance company for someone you are suing for a slip and fall will find out about. In your deposition, they are going to ask you to disclose all of your doctors. In your deposition, they will ask you to sign HIPAA authorizations, meaning giving permission to those doctors to release your medical records before the injury. And if you refuse to do that, then they can file a motion and get your case dismissed, because you put your medical condition at issue when you file the lawsuit. So the insurance company has the right to inquire about your medical condition, not just since the accident, but since they're only responsible for what's new or for what's aggravated, they have the right to compare before with after. So it's totally irrelevant for them to ask for your medical records before the accident. When you tell your lawyer from the very beginning what your injuries are, and when you go to a doctor after your work-related injury or after your accident, and you are 100% transparent, shaffaf, and you tell your doctor everything that existed before, the doctor will be able to look very closely at what you're reporting now and help you distinguish what's old from what's new. When you tell your lawyer from the very beginning what's old and what's new, the lawyer will guide you through how we go about showing that you have more of now, or you have new injuries. Most of the time, Ustaz Ammar, the greatest majority of people who come to us in, say, car accidents, they had pre-existing, because people our age, and I'm 56, and I think you're a little bit younger than me, Pat, and people even younger than older, we carry things in our body. As we grow older, we have things. It's called life. It's called wear and tear on our life. So it's okay. Now we have to be able to show that either we have new ones, or we have new ones and aggravated old ones. So most of my clients who come and tell me what they have, we will be able to often show that this accident, because again, you are in a way an ex-call client. Let's say someone who already has a disc in their low back, and now, God forbid, they are in a work-related injury or a car accident. The chances of this disc becoming worse, trust me, is almost 100%. Why? Because as to the disc in their back, they are an eggshell skull client. They are already very vulnerable in there. They already have something. Do you know how much easier it is to injure that body part that's already less than perfect? It becomes very easy to injure it, to injure more of it. So I hope we answered that question. Let's take a final break, and then we're going to talk about psychological cases in Social Security.
هل لديك مشاكل في قضايا الضمان الاجتماعي أو قانون إصابات العمل؟ المحامي باتريك هوران من مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يضع خبرة 28 عاما في قضايا الضمان الاجتماعي وإصابات ضمن العمل في خدمتكم. الاستشارات مجانية. اتصل الآن بمكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز 248-557-3645. يتحدثون لغتكم العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتمنى لكم السلامة في ظل انتشار وباء كوفيد-19. المحامية جومانا كيروز مثلت على مدى 22 عاما ضحايا حوادث السيارات مع طاقم من المحامين ذوي الخبرة، وحصلت لموكليها على تعويضات بمئات الملايين من الدولارات. قبل أن تختار المحامي الذي سيدافع عن قضيتك، دقق في تاريخه المهني. ومع مكاتب جومانا كيروز ستنذهل بآراء مئات الموكلين وخبراتهم الإيجابية في جوجل ريفيوز. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يتحدثون لغتك العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645 والاستشارة مجانية. Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. عودة لبرنامج Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز. أرقام الهواتف في الاستوديو للاتصالات والأسئلة على الهواء مباشرة 313-769-6666 519-256-1023 وعلى الواتساب 313-327-7074. رقم المكتب في مكتب المحامي جومانا كيروز 248-557-3645. جومانا نرجع لك.
شكرا رامي. رامي، ما فيني اقول لك قديش دق بوتر حساس الاستاذ عمار وقت قال انه في كتير اشخاص ما بيترددوا يخبروا شو حالتهم هي لانه بدها تاذيهم. بدون شك رح تاذيهم، بس مش رح تاذيهم بالطريقه اللي مفكرين فيها. هن مفكرين رح تاذيهم بقيمه الماديه للملف. ممكن تاذيهم الملف كله ينزت برا، والميديكال ريكورد تصير ميديكال بيلز، بعتذر، تصير مسؤوليتهم الخاصه. وقت اللي بيقعد الانسان وبيحلف اليمين بافاده deposition وعم بيقول انه هو ما بشي او عم بيخفف شو هو، ما this is a deposition under oath. شو يعني؟ يعني صرت هلا بيتركوك بيسالوك الاسئله، بيطلبوا بعدين الملفات وبيلاقوا انه حضرتك مكذب ومخبى. شو صفت فراد، لانه a deposition is under oath. وقت اللي انت بتقعد بافاده يعني انت حلفت اليمين انه انت عم بتقول الحقيقه and nothing but the truth. so اذا اتهموك بالفراد، الكيس كله تبعك بده ينزت برا، كله ما بيعود موجود. مش بس رح تاذي حالك، رح تاذي حالك لدرجه ما بتصير لو بتقول وبتخبر شخصين، الطبيب والمحامي، لحتى يحضروك ويحضروا الملف تبعك ويقدروا يفرجوا القديم من جديد والقديم من والمضاعفات للقديم. very important point. ننتقل، عنا 7 دقائق لسوشيال سيكيورتي. المحامي باتريك هوران كان عم بيمثل موكل الموكلين تبعنا، بفتكر عندها والله يشفيها يا رب سكيزوفرينيا، اللي هي حالة نفسية، ورفضوا لها السوشيال سيكيورتي وقت اللي قدمته، فاستعانت فينا وعم يستأنف لها واستأنف لها، وكان عنده استئناف in front of the administrative law judge بالسوشيال سيكيورتي. So خلينا نسأله شو صار in that case. Can you tell us about the client who applied for Social Security and was denied? I believe the underlying condition was a psychological condition, I think schizophrenia, if I remember. And you represented her in front of the administrative law judge. Can you tell us what happened and what your advice is when it comes to psychological injuries?
Sure, Joumana. So I've got a lot of psychiatric cases in Social Security. They're pretty common, and it's a different kind of law because you can see when somebody has a broken leg, you see them limp, right? But somebody could have,
or you can see when they have a disc because you can see the MRI results.
Right, and with a mental or an emotional disability, that's not as visible, and it's more difficult for a judge to see exactly what's going on with them. So I guess the advice I have is it's very important to follow through with treatment and make a really good record when you see your psychiatrist or therapist of what your symptoms are. And specifically, I think it's pretty normal for all of us to walk around with varying degrees of depression or anxiety. And a lot of us, most of us, are able to function with those problems and we don't need to make a claim for disability. So the fact that someone is at the point where they can't function, they can't work because of this disability, means they have to be having really significant symptoms. Okay?
So let's remind the listeners that when you apply for disability, you're telling the government two things. You're telling them you have a condition, physical or mental or both, and you're telling them that condition is likely to keep you out of work. You're not able to return to work, gainful activity for at least a year.
That's right, and that's very significant.
Exactly. So compare that with that's why a lot of depression cases, if you apply for Social Security because you have depression, yes, you may have depression, but is it likely to keep you out of work for gainful activity for a year? We know, the judges know, a lot of people who are depressed and are functioning in their life. They're functioning depressed people. A lot of people are on medication. A lot of people are not on medication. They suffer from anxiety. They can still get gainful activity, enter into gainful activity, or depression. So to win your Social Security case, it has to be the kind of case. And listen, severe depression could be preventing you from gainful activity. But I think what Attorney Patrick Horan is saying, and I think I did interrupt you, I'm so sorry.
Sure.
You were telling me that judges are like human beings. These psychiatric and psychological injuries, you can't see them. The judge cannot see them with her or his two eyes. So you have to convince them that they exist, that they are significant, and they are not likely to get you to go back to work or go to work within 1 year. That is why you said to me, this person who you were representing for something very serious, like schizophrenia, correct? Was it schizophrenia?
Yes, and she had been hospitalized multiple occasions over a period of years. And if we didn't have those records, it would have been impossible to win the case. But I was able to explain to the judge, this is not a typical bipolar or depressive case that only requires a little bit of therapy. This woman was having breaks with reality. She had psychotic breaks, and she had to be hospitalized on multiple occasions.
So significant treatment. It's not enough for you to be diagnosed, get a diagnosis from a doctor for a mental or psychological injury. Through the treatment, you will be able to show the judge that you really are, because judges are human beings, and when they cannot see an injury, they question it. And two, through the significant ongoing treatment, you show that you're not likely to enter into gainful activity for the next year or so.
Right. And so just, that comes down to be very honest. And a minute ago, you used a great phrase, Joumana. You talked about transparency, and not only with your attorney, but with your doctor. Make sure that your doctor hears if of all your symptoms, no matter if you feel some shame about telling them. The doctor needs to hear about those so that they get in the records and we can use them to win the case.
اوكي، عندنا دقيقتين فقط رح ترجم بطريقه سريعه. رامي، بيقدر الانسان يقدم على سوشيال سيكيورتي لاصابات نفسيه. المشكله هي عمليا انه القضاة اللي بيتسمعوا هدول الكيسز، يعني جاي الشخص قدامهم يقول لهم اعطيني اس اس اي واس اس دي لان عندي اصابه نمبر 1، ونمبر 2 بتمنعني انه اقدر اشتغل او ارجع على الشغل. المشكله بالاصابات النفسيه انه القضاة ما بيشوفوها بعيونهم، مش مثل الديسك، مش مثل العمليه. يعني في برهان بيقدر القاضي، بيقدر المحامي يفرج القاضي. الاصابات النفسيه هي تشخيص من قبل دكتور. كقاعده عامه القضاة عندهم ظن بتشخيص فقط. يعني الإنسان اللي بيروح وبس بيجيب دايجنوسيس من الدكتور، بس ما في علاج متواصل، علاج مع السايكولوجيست، مع السايكايترست، أدوية اللي بيساعد كتير، مع أنه ما بنتمناها لحدا، الهوسبيتاليزيشنز بسبب الأشياء النفسية. يعني المشكلة فيهم هول إنه بدك تقدر تقنع القاضي إنه أولا موجودين، وثانيا انه موجودين وبيمنعوك من انه تعيش حياتك. لانه في كتير عالم عندهم اصابات نفسيه وقادرين يشتغلوا، في كتير عالم عندهم ديبرشن بس قادرين يشتغلوا، قادرين يكملوا بحياتهم. ما بيقدر هيدا الانسان يحصل على اساساي، لانه ما بيكفي اصابه، بدك اصابه بتطلعك برات العمل. الوقت خلص. شكرا للجميع مستمعين متصلين. Thank you Attorney Patrick Horan and thank you رامي.